or pulling out. See if that happens to anybody else.
Ralph, interesting editorial board column by the Washington Post going off of this Kristen Welker Meet the Press interview, where it says Trump tries a softer tone and a harder one, too. For Trump 2.0, prepare for the worst, but do not assume it at every turn. Fascinating because, of course, for us, and I think for everybody else, the headline was arrest Liz Cheney, arrest Benny Thompson, arrest everybody. But no, I'm not gonna call for that. But what the Post is saying, sift through that, but also look where he talks about wanting compromise on immigration, wanting compromise possibly on abortion. That's hard for Democrats to do when he's talking about arresting a member of the caucus. But is the Washington Post onto something here? Should they try to seek compromise on, for instance, Dreamers or the immigration issue? That's what the Washington Post is saying.
I think that the challenge Democrats have is not to play to the cheap seats that Trump sometimes plays to. And you need to keep in mind, what is your end goal? What is your end result? And if compromising sometime to get some things through for the good of the people, then you do that. That's not selling out. That's why we sent you to Washington.
That's right.
And I think that and those of us that are out there in the communities and speak up need to give them the room to do that, because at the end of the day, we want to see what is better.
Give the Democrats room. Let me ask you this question, because the Post is saying Democrats should sit down and start talking now. Should Hakeem Jeffries sit down with Donald Trump and try to figure out, let's say, possible compromises on immigration?
I think Hakeem Jeffries should sit down and seek to do it, and let President-elect Trump be the bad guy in the room if that's what happens. But don't let it be said you didn't try to do all you could for your constituents, and we shouldn't be outside screaming at you for going into a meeting. That's why we sent you to Washington.
That's right, Jeff.
I would just add, Jonathan and I both covered President Trump's first term. He dangles compromises and then he goes away. I mean, there were talks then about doing something with the Dreamers, and he actually seemed like he wanted to do something about the Dreamers, and then he walked away from it. Same with gun control. There was a moment after, I think it was Parkland, where it looked seriously like President Trump might want to do something on gun violence protection, and then the NRA got involved, and then he pulled away. So he does talk about compromise, and then it doesn't come to fruition with the Democrats.
Yeah, you know what's so fascinating, Jonathan? I know you've covered him, and I know you and Jeff agree on this. He talks about compromise, and he pulls back. For somebody that controls his base as much as he does, he's awfully fearful of it at times. Like, for instance, he will not talk about Operation Warp Speed, which, again, we've talked about around this table, perhaps one of the great achievements scientifically over the past 50 years. Won't talk about that because he did one time with Bill O'Reilly and he got booed. So I'm wondering, is there any reason to believe that he's going to move, that he's not going to be as constrained by his base this time, or is it going to be more of the same?
To this point, it looks like more of the same. You're right about Operation Warp Speed. I was talking to someone else about this a few days ago who said that should be the first room of his presidential library, that accomplishment, because it's something that usually takes 5, 6, 7 years to develop a vaccine. They did it in 10 months. They were able to distribute it during a global pandemic. But this is someone who, when given the choice between being a unifier or a divider, has almost always chosen division. And we're seeing that now even with some of the response to some of his cabinet picks, where there was a real push on the right for folks like Kash Patel. And we have reporting that Trump was waffling about whether he wanted to put Patel up for an FBI job, this FBI director job, because they didn't think he'd be confirmed. There was some thought they'd give him maybe a lesser job that he could get through. But then Steve Bannon, others said, no, you need to put him at the top of the FBI. And that's what he's going with. So there have been moments where he's still, despite now never running for re-election, never running for election again, he still seems fearful of alienating the base too much.
So the leader will move on now of the rebel group credited with overthrowing Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria is now promising to publish a list of